relatively new recognition program. And so Betsy Huber, the president of the National Grange, has agreed to explain to you a little bit about the point of this program. Betsy?
Thank you, Doug. It's my great pleasure to be here today. The Grange Hall of Fame was created in 2015 to recognize Grange members who had a significant role in the history of the National Grange. The first inductees were the 7 founders of the order and Caroline Hall, often called the eighth founder. And since then, 7 other members have been honored for extraordinary contributions to the Grange, including those we recognize today. This is a very exclusive club. Qualities that the selection committee looks for are impact on the Grange, being instrumental in the origins, growth, success, and evolution of the Grange, including the fraternal aspects. Their impact needs to extend beyond their local area, namely, impact on the state, nation, and world, being instrumental in making the world a better place on a small or large scale. Longevity as a member of the Grange is not sufficient as the sole factor for consideration in the Hall of Fame. Contributions may be in public service, military, government, science, the arts and humanities, or business. A level of uniqueness is required in their contributions. For instance, being in the military or government with honorable but not distinguished accomplishments is not sufficient. In addition, nominees should be no longer living. So Pennsylvania's 3 awardees certainly meet all these criteria, and I'm personally delighted that they have been given this recognition. The 2 families that are represented today, both of these inductees were my mentors, and it's an honor to participate in this ceremony. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Our first inductee is Leonard Rhone, who was a past master of the State Grange and very instrumental in the National Grange, as you can read in the biography that's printed. And although Mr. Rhone is no longer living and there are no known Rhone survivors, we've invited representatives from his home Grange, Progress number 96 in Center County. And I understand that LaDawn Young is going to give the introduction of Mr. Rhone.
Thank you, and good afternoon. You don't need to worry about me. I'm accustomed to speaking to numerous people. I am sharing with you a quote from the 1897 booklet that was published for the National Grange and the State Grange session that was held in Harrisburg. And what they're describing is Leonard Rhone, saying that he originated the annual Grange picnic at Center Hall, which has grown from a small beginning to colossal proportions, every year adding increased numbers of exhibitors and visitors. The Grange Park, where the exhibits are now held, is one of the finest parks in the state, and as the years go by, will increase in beauty and usefulness. As a member of the Fair Committee, I'm often asked, what would Leonard Rhone think of our Grange Fair now? It is 10 days. It has a budget of $3.9 million, a gate in excess of 200,000 people, and its economic impact on Center Pennsylvania is between $16 and $20 million. Leonard Rhone would expect us to have done that. Grangers are capable of carrying out colossal things. He knew that and was proud and continued the legacy. I want to quote from you one of the last stanzas of the poem of Granger's Picnic. After all is silent except the cricket's drone, a happy spirit wanders about the grounds alone. The spirit of the founder, the kindly Leonard Rhone. As you know, the fair is over, although his spirit might be there because we've been invaded by Auburn tailgaters. We have over 400 tailgaters at the Grange Park now. But I understand that his spirit has come here now, and I present to you Leonard Rhone.
We, from the State Grange History Committee, have a memento to present to, in this case, Progress Grange, number 96, and accepting is their president, Denny McCluskey.
It's really great to see so many Grangers out there, and it's even greater that you can see me. I'm very honored to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I knew the organization that I was promoting would stand as a strong and determined advocate for farm and rural communities. And as its motto declares, it will always persevere. Thank you.
And we hope that you'll proudly display that gift in your Grange Hall, because it is something that will memorialize Brother Rhone. Now I'd like to introduce to you Brother Bill Steele, who is the past president of both the Pennsylvania State and National Granges.
Thank you, Doug. John Walker Scott was born in Robinson Township in Allegheny County. And soon after that, the family, well, he was a teenager, okay? They moved up to Butler County and continued to farm. And gal next door got married to John. And the three sons that are sitting here at the table are the product of that marriage. Jim, David, and Tom. And a lot of what I was about to say is printed in your program. So I'm kind of like the preacher who passed out the sermon, and you have the opportunity to read it, and you'll know when to fall asleep. A couple of things that are important. John always had a great admiration and love for education. And he was a member of many school boards in Butler County. He was active in the Baptist church when they were in Butler. And it was probably the fault of the Pennsylvania State Department of Forests and Waters that he made it to the State Grange and a home in Mechanicsburg. They decided that Moraine State Park and Lake needed to be there and condemned the property, and it became the park. John's love for education also was prominent in the Grange itself. Back in the day, as some of us say, we had leadership conferences all over the state, and he was an important part of those conferences, taking all of the department heads with him so that we all learned our jobs. One of his major accomplishments as master in Pennsylvania was the Constitutional Convention. There was an urge at that point to write a new constitution for Pennsylvania. And he and a few others convinced the legislature that the best way to go was to develop 4 amendments and those were presented to the voters and passed. He also was responsible in a large part for the eminent domain law, the Code of 1964. Those of you who get property condemned understand the importance of that rule today. It used to be your property could be condemned and you would accept the payment and maybe complain a lot about it. But the only way to get anything more was to get to court. Today, you're guaranteed at least 80%, and then within 60 days of the condemnation, excuse me, but that also allows you to go to further court to settle this situation. John met with presidents of the United States while he was in Washington, D.C. as National Master. They included Nixon, Johnson, Ford, and Carter. His first challenge in getting to elected National Master was the demand of a mortgage payment. The women of the Grange came to his aid and raised $300,000 through the sale of cookbooks. John had this tremendous work ethic. After completing 11 years at head of the National Grange, he came back to Mechanicsburg and almost immediately went to work. The Department of Agriculture took him on as the chief of the Fruit and Vegetable Inspection Division. And after that, he logged 10,000 hours as a volunteer at Harrisburg Hospital. One of the other accomplishments that I think is impressive is that he was a high school dropout. But prior to the 1986 reunion, the 50th annual reunion of his class, he earned his high school diploma. I have wonderful memories of John. One of the earliest ones probably made him wonder why he ever selected me to join him in Washington, D.C. National Grange session was in Daytona Beach, Florida that first year, 1968. And we had an old tradition that somebody had to drive the truck from Washington to wherever the convention was. And the new guy on the block was going to get the job. One of the guys that worked for the Grange hired the truck and we got it loaded. And there was this discussion. John says, "I'm going to go with you." And Judy Massobny said, "No, you're not." "I'm going to go with you." "No, you're not." And so it was arranged that I get behind the wheel and take off for Daytona Beach. I had a little problem in Wilson, North Carolina, and had to call back to the office. JC, did you get the extra insurance that we would take care of on the truck? No. Well, call them and tell them that you want it, and in 10 minutes I will call you and tell you what happened. The truck went from Wilson, North Carolina to Daytona Beach with some bumper stickers at the top corner that said, "Go Grange." I happened to hit something. On the way back, Wilson, North Carolina, another problem. I could not see that truckload of pigs in front of me because of the steam. The head gasket blew. I got hauled to a truck place. They fixed it. They got me back on the road. A few miles up the road, steam's coming out of the tailpipe again. I get towed into Richmond, Virginia, and call who? John Scott. He said, Ed and I will be right down to help you transfer the load and get you back to Washington. Ed said, I'll drive. It wasn't more than a half an hour up the road. Poor John probably said, now what's going on in the car behind us, because we were pulling off. I walked around the truck and said, Ed's fallen asleep, I'm driving. But that's the kind of thing that he did for us as his employees. And one other story, if I have time, and that's from Binghamton, New York. John was a member of the Farmers and Traders Life Insurance Board of Directors. He had a meeting in Syracuse. Bob Proctor, our national secretary, and I were to join him in Binghamton for a leadership conference of state leaders. Fog moved in, and our plane was canceled. Called again, and John said, go ahead and drive my car. And I did. They all wondered why I would take that risk. But John Scott was a true public servant and true patron of husbandry. And I will remember him best by what I'd like to unveil to you over on the piano. One day in July of 2002, we had a little backup in the basement with water. John happened to be talking to someone, and in a few minutes, who was in the basement with me, mopping up? That's the John Scott that I will remember all of my life. Thank you.
We have similar personalized mementos for each of the Scott families, and I understand that Jim, the oldest son, is going to accept on behalf of Tom and Dave and himself. Jim, do you want to come up here so we can hear you?
Well, I certainly want to thank all of you for my brothers also for this really fantastic event. Postponed many times, but we finally made it. And I want to say a couple things. Try to be brief. One thing that is important for you to know is the role of my mother in all of this. John and Dorothy were a team. They worked together, and it was really hard to tell sometimes who was doing what. My mother wrote his speeches. Sitting at the dining room table, I can still see her with her yellow pads there writing away. She signed all of the golden sheafs that went out to all the thousands of Grangers who were earning that particular certificate. She called it, "I must go into the office today and do some more threshing." And as my dad had some health problems, especially later in life, she was his driver. She got him up in the morning. She made sure that he was dressed, that he looked as presentable as he could look. She got him to the meeting. She propped him up. And she brought him home. And she nursed him through that. I saw a man that looked like 90 years old go back to look like a man who was 60 years old after they finally figured out what was the matter with him and got him the appropriate medication. My father part of it was really nice to hear about the educational thing. His dropping out was caused by the need of the family to move. He was a junior in high school, and his dad said, well, you know, we're going to go and buy this farm in Butler, and I'm going to need you to work. And that's what he did. And he persisted through the rest of his life. But he did finally get his degree, his GED from Cumberland Valley High School, right down the road from his house. What carried him through all of this, and I would like to think, what he also passed on to us, were his farmer values. Number one, the animals are most important. You always take care of the animals first. And in the Grange, those were his colleagues. It was his collegiality, his willing to work with someone else and make sure that they were doing well, that I think caused him to be so effective across the country. Number two, you work till the job is done. It was never an 8-hour day on the farm. And he would often get up in the middle of the night to see if the barn was burning, which was our great fear. His bedroom was the closest to the barn that he could get, just in case. And certainly his travels, his tireless work on behalf of the issues of the Grange and doing the job as he understood it was part of that. A third one, frugality matters. You don't waste anything, you don't throw anything away that might be useful, because someday it surely will be. And I've often felt after that, everyone should have a wagon shed, which is what we had. And if you needed to fix something, you went out to the wagon shed and you looked around and you found something that would do the job. His a little bit on the story of the National Grange building, I think that needs to be said, is that he did tell me once about his meeting with the bank. He'd just gotten the job. The bank called him in and they said, we are applying to foreclose on this building because we don't think you can get the money. And he said, well, I think I can get that money. And they said, well, where do you think you're going to get this much money? And he said, well, I think I'll borrow that money from our state granges, which is what he did. He offered the state granges some interest on the loans. He collected enough from the state granges to pay that building off. And then came the women. My mom and Judy Massobny, Mary Shannon, was it Amy Grobusky? I'm not sure. There was another woman in there. Who was it? Jenny Grobusky, sorry, yes. They came up with this idea of a national cookbook, and they invited senators and representatives to send favorite recipes. They collected favorite recipes from all over the country, and this book turned into a barn burner, and they paid off that building. They paid off those loans. And the final one is improvisation, and that connects to what I just said. But in our lingo, this is the farmer fix. And if something is broken and there's not an obvious solution, it's up to you to come up with something creative to get that tractor back on the road. And I think that's what he did. And I hope that we're up to that ourselves. Thank you again so much.
What I'm about to do is a great honor, but it also makes me feel really old. When the committee was planning these recognitions, we wanted the introductions to be done, if possible, by someone who had some personal connection with the various inductees. And it seems like I was elected because Luther Snyder was my mentor. Many people taught me a lot in the Grange, but certainly Luther Snyder was at the very top of the list. Although my family had been Grange members for 3 generations and I was the 4th, they weren't particularly active at anything other than the local level. And Luther Snyder had, as in his time as state secretary, a secretary's award program. And I remember having Luther and Faye come to our Grange and present that award to me, and I was a really geeky teenager. And if you look at those pictures, you'll think, oh my, you've really filled out there, son. And I know it was Luther behind the scenes that apparently suggested to the then state master, Wayne Redinger, that there was somebody in that south central part of Pennsylvania where they needed a youth committee member. And lo and behold, I got that letter from Wayne Redinger appointing me to the state youth committee, and then things just snowballed from there. I remember Luther saying, oh, come on, you can do this, when he called me one day and said, will you be state youth director? And then a couple years later, he wanted to know if I would be the chairperson of the national convention coming to Pennsylvania, where it had not been for 42 years. I said, Luther, I never was in charge of a convention. That's all right. You can do it. We'll help you. So I learned a great deal. Traveled a great deal with Luther and Faye over all kinds of snowy roads as we went all over Pennsylvania to various leadership conferences. And so I have those very fond memories. So we are very pleased to present to all of the Snyder family these mementos. Faye, if you'd like to come up, you're going to, I understand, accept on behalf of the family. We'd also like to introduce to you, and if you'd stand, Anna Mae Noss, Lou Ann Boos, James Luther Jr., we know him as Bud, and by the way, today is Bud's birthday. Joyce Merritt, and the baby, who was really, truly a baby when we were doing all that traveling around Pennsylvania, and that is Jennifer Kane. Faye? And I'm not going to take the time, but ask Faye about the cake story sometime when you see her. We often laugh about that, don't we?
Yes, we do often laugh about that, and I there we go. Say thank you ever so much, Douglas, for the great words of appreciation that you have given us. And when we'll get right back to that cake celebration there. Remember back, and I think it was for the 100th anniversary, we had this styrofoam cake, which was probably about maybe a 15 by 18 piece of styrofoam, and had it professionally decorated into a happy birthday cake. And as Doug had mentioned, we had all of these regional meetings across the state, and we lugged this cake along with us at every time. We presented it after the meeting, and we had the big song that we would sing of it. And we were in charge of traveling with this birthday cake. So we had a station wagon, and of course hauling as many of the officers around as we could in a few vehicles. We had packed the back of it full of all of the luggages and the packages and, of course, the birthday cake. So we come down, we had Doug with us, we stopped at his house and dropped him off, and in order to get his luggage out of the back of the wagon, we had to unload the birthday cake. So we take the birthday cake out, set it on the roof of the car because we had the railings on the side. We set it up there and unpacked his stuff, closed up the doors, traveled down to Camp Hill, which was probably about 25 miles, and we get down there and pull up in front of our house, and we get out and go to get our piece of luggage out of the back of the car. Lo and behold, on top of the station wagon was the birthday cake. That dear little cake stood that drive all the way down 322 to Camp Hill. So that's the story of the birthday cake. It is a pleasure for me this afternoon, to accept this. And on behalf of the family, I am honored and humbled to accept this gift of recognition of Luther's induction into the National Grange Hall of Fame. We had the privilege of serving Pennsylvania in many of the subordinate and the Pomona meetings that Luther held offices in the state and the National Grange for many years, and traveled many miles across the state, the Grange, visiting Granges across the state and nation. Many of you watched our children grow up in the Grange as they traveled with us, and I would like all of them to stand up, please. All the grandchildren and children, the family. And the in-laws, and the in-laws. This was the family that we brought across the state with us. We have many cherished memories of Grange visits and friends we met through the years. Thank you to every one of you who opened up your homes and welcomed us to visit with you as a family. Many people, and as you heard Doug say, benefited from Luther's mentorship over the years, and he would be honored to be recognized for his work in the Grange in this way. One of Luther's favorite things about the Grange was that the whole family was involved. He would be proud that his children and grandchildren continue to have his legacy with their work in the Grange today. Thank you again for recognizing Luther in this way.